You are looking at a perfectly round half-inch hole. It looks harmless, but behind this single opening inside the wooden beam of your porch, your garage, or your barn, there is a tunnel system that can stretch up to 8 inches. And inside that tunnel, a female carpenter bee has laid her eggs. They will hatch, they will chew their way out, and they will return to the exact same spot next spring to do it all over again. This is not a sting problem. This is a structural damage problem. And after treating hundreds of infestations, I am going to show you the 4-step protocol that eliminates them fast and stops the damage permanently. One of these steps uses a number that surprises every exterminator I know. 90 days. That number is from a polymer-based insecticide. The final step of a 4-part protocol, but it only works if you get one thing right first. I am here at my pole barn with my daughter Mackenzie. The beams are riddled with half-inch holes, and the mistake most people make, sealing them too soon. Here is why. Because a carpenter bee doesn't eat wood, she excavates it. That perfectly round half-inch hole is just the entrance. From there, she bores inward at a 90-degree angle, then turns parallel to the grain, carving a smooth tunnel that can run 4, 6, even 8 inches deep. Inside, she carves out brood chambers, lays an egg on a ball of pollen paste made from flower nectar and sawdust, seals the chamber, and repeats the process. By late summer, those eggs have hatched, and the new adults chew their way out through the same entrance or by cutting a fresh exit through the side of the beam. If you seal that hole in spring when the female is still inside, she'll chew a second exit hole to escape. If you seal it after she's left, you've trapped her babies inside, and they'll chew their own exits. Either way, you've multiplied the damage. My name doesn't matter for this. Just call me Dad. And standing beside me with safety glasses is my daughter Mackenzie. We're here because this barn, like a million other wooden structures across the country, is under attack. And the thing most people reach for first, the yellow sticky traps sold at every big box store, accomplishes almost nothing. Those traps catch male bees, the ones that hover in your face but can't sting. They do nothing to the egg-laying female tunneling through your fascia board. I learned this the expensive way, replacing a porch beam that looked fine on the outside, but crumbled when I touched it. Inside, 7 tunnels had merged into a hollow chamber that couldn't support a hanging plant, let alone a roof. That's when I stumbled onto a study from the University of Kentucky that changed everything. They tested fipronil, the same active ingredient used in termite defense, against carpenter bees, but not as a liquid spray, as an expanding foam that fills every inch of a gallery in seconds. The foam is non-repellent, meaning the bee doesn't detect danger and retreat. She walks through it, spreads it deeper, and delivers a lethal dose to herself, her eggs, and every larva in the chamber. It sounds like the end of the problem. It is not. That foam kills what's inside today. It does nothing to stop a new female next spring from using that same perfectly drilled tunnel, because carpenter bees are hardwired to return to the exact spot where they emerged. The moment I understood that, I realized I needed a second step, a physical barrier that a bee could never chew through. And the solution came not from a pest control catalog, but from a beekeeping supplier 30 miles from here. A stainless steel plug, the size of a thimble, designed originally to block feeder holes in commercial hives. Its mesh surface is so fine that a bee's mandible can't grip it, and its domed shape makes it impossible to push back out. The first time I handed one to Mackenzie, she slid it into a fresh hole with one finger. It stayed there, as if it had been welded in place. But even that wasn't the final piece, because if you stop after plugging, you've protected one hole on one beam, the female bee whose nest you just destroyed. Her sisters are already scouting other timbers, and they'll drill new holes a few inches away. That's when I found the product that changed everything. And its label carries a number that most pest control professionals won't believe until they test it themselves. The product is called Suspend Polyzone, and the number on its label is 90 days. That's how long a single application remains active on exposed wood, through rain, through sun, through the exact weather conditions that carpenter bees wait for every spring. The reason it works is not the active ingredient by itself. Deltamethrin is a standard pyrethroid, used in dozens of insecticides. What makes Polyzone different is a proprietary polymer layer, developed by Bayer. When you spray it, the active ingredient gets locked inside microscopic polymer capsules that chemically bond to the surface. As the polymer slowly weathers away, fresh active ingredient is exposed at a steady rate. No other consumer insecticide releases its payload this evenly. Most products dump their entire dose in the first rain, and by week 3 they're gone. This one holds on for 90 days. That single number rewrote the entire protocol I had been following for years, because insecticide alone only treats active infestations. A 90-day barrier treats the infestation that hasn't started yet. It means a female, arriving in late spring, lands on a beam, touches the surface, and receives a lethal dose before her mandibles ever break the wood. But this was step 4 in my protocol, and before Mackenzie and I could apply it, we had to address what was already living inside the timbers. We started with the foam. The product we chose is called Fuse Foam, an expanding aerosol labeled for carpenter bees that combines fipronil and imidacloprid. Both are non-repellent, which is critical. A repellent spray would send the bee scurrying deeper into her tunnel, sealing off the end with sawdust and surviving the treatment. Non-repellents are undetectable. She crawls through the foam, carries it on her body, into every brood chamber, and grooms herself, ingesting the chemical. Within hours, she's dead. Her eggs never hatch. I handed Mackenzie the can, showed her the narrow straw tip, and pointed to a hole at eye level on a vertical post. She inserted the straw, pressed the trigger for 2 seconds, and pulled back fast. The hole coughed out a column of white foam like shaving cream, expanding as it hit the air. She moved to the next hole and repeated it. 12 holes across 6 beams. The foam expands at a 30-to-1 ratio. 1 ounce fills an entire 8-inch gallery. In less than 3 minutes, every active nest in the barn had been treated. Then came the hardest part: waiting. You cannot seal a treated hole the same day. If you do, any bee that was away foraging when we sprayed will return, find her entrance blocked, and chew a new exit right next to the old one. We had to leave the holes open for 24 hours, so every returning female could walk through the residual chemical and die inside her own tunnel. Only then could we move to step 2. Mackenzie opened a small plastic tub labeled BB Pro 30. Inside were dozens of stainless steel mesh plugs, each shaped like a miniature thimble with a domed top and a corrugated sidewall. The plugs are originally manufactured as feeder hole stoppers for commercial honeybee hives, but a carpenter bee hole averages half an inch, nearly an identical diameter. The stainless mesh is tough enough that a bee's mandibles, which can excavate through an inch of wood, slip right off. Mackenzie took a plug between her thumb and forefinger and pushed it into the first treated hole. It seated flush with the wood surface, the dome protruding just slightly. She moved down the beam, popping them in like buttons. even into holes bored on the underside, where gravity should have made it impossible. The corrugated walls expanded against the wood fibers, locking each plug in place. No glue, no hammer, no fasteners. She finished the entire barn in under 10 minutes. Step 3 brought out the old-fashioned fix, a tub of standard interior wood filler and a flexible putty knife. I worked the filler into the plugged holes, smoothing it even with the surrounding grain, then wiped away the excess. The filler is sandable and paintable, so once it cured, the holes would vanish under a coat of stain. But wood filler is cosmetic. It conceals the damage and waterproofs the surface, but it adds zero protection against future attack. That's why most people who fill holes without treating or plugging them first still see new holes the very next season. The Carpenter bee survival instinct doesn't care about putty. It cares about bare wood. Step 4 had to cover every square inch of that bare wood, including the tight joints where beams met, the undersides of the rafters, and the window trim that framed the barn's upper loft. And that's when I strapped on the backpack sprayer. The backpack sprayer held 4 gallons of mixed Suspend Polyzone at the label rate, 1.5 fluid ounces per G all-in. That's the sweet spot for porous wood, where the polymer can grip without running off. I pressurized the tank with 10 pumps, adjusted the wand to a fine cone, and started at the highest point, the peak of the gable, where the rafters meet the ridge beam. Carpenter bees prefer the underside of wood surfaces, the hidden face that never sees direct sun. So I angled the wand upward, letting the mist drift into the shadows, coating every inch I couldn't see with my eyes. I worked methodically, left to right, top to bottom. The wand hissed and spat. Within 30 seconds, the air smelled faintly of the chemical, something between latex, paint, and new electronics. Mackenzie stood behind me, watching. When I handed her the wand, she took it without hesitation and finished the lower beams, while I topped off the tank. She was 11 years old at the time. If an 11-year-old can do this, there's no excuse for the guy with the yellow sticky traps. Here is what most people don't understand about Carpenter bee. Damage, once it starts, it compounds. A female that emerges in late summer doesn't leave the property. She overwinters in an abandoned tunnel, sometimes in a cluster of siblings, and emerges the following spring, already imprinted on that structure. She doesn't scout new territory. She drills her own brood hole, 6 inches from the one she was born in. The next year, her daughters do the same. 4 tunnels become 12. 12 become 30. A barn that looks fine from the driveway can have its entire soffit hollowed out within 5 seasons. I've seen a single fascia board with 23 active holes. When I removed it, there was almost no wood left inside, just shellac-thin outer walls and a museum of old pollen cakes. That board had been holding a gutter. One heavy rain, one hard freeze, and the whole assembly would have torn free and landed on a parked truck. The repair cost $1,200. The Suspend Polyzone treatment that would have prevented it cost about $6 per gallon, but it gets even bigger, because Carpenter bees are not just a structural problem. They're an ecological fork in the road. They're pollinators. Unlike honeybees, they're solitary and native to North America. They visit blueberries, tomatoes, eggplants, the kind of crops that don't attract honeybees. When you kill a carpenter bee, you are removing a pollinator that an entire garden relied on. And this is where most pest control advice completely falls apart. The industry tells you to spray and kill without asking whether you should. My protocol is not about slaughter, it's about protection. The foam kills what's already inside the wood, yes, but the stainless plugs and the surface barrier prevent new nesting without indiscriminate killing. A female bee that lands on a treated beam receives a lethal dose from the polymer surface before she drills. That's targeted. She's the one doing damage. The males, the foragers, the bees that never touch the wood. They are untouched. That's the difference between a poison fog that kills everything and a surgical barrier that preserves the pollinators while defending your structure. It took me years to land on this distinction, and I landed on it because of a conversation I had with a county extension agent in Ohio who asked me one simple question: do you want to kill bees, or do you want to save your barn? The answer isn't the same thing. Now, the backpacked sprayer emptied, I mixed a second tank and hit every surface twice. The undersides of the rafters, the window trim, the fascia, the corner posts where two planes of wood meet, the tops of the beams I could reach with a ladder. The polymer residue dried clear within an hour, invisible against the grain, according to the manufacturer's data. It can withstand up to 2 inches of rainfall before any measurable degradation. That means a spring thunderstorm won't wash it off. A full month of intermittent rain won't wash it off. The label says 90 days, and independent testing from Mississippi State's entomology department confirms that deltamethrin, encapsulated in polymer, remains lethal to wood-boring insects beyond 75 days of field exposure. That's the window. Female Carpenter bees in most of the continental United States start scouting nest sites in late March and continue through June. If you apply the barrier by mid-March, you've covered the entire nesting season with one application. That's not just convenient. That's the difference between a structure that survives the decade and one that needs a rebuild. We finished spraying at 4 in the afternoon. The foam had been in the holes for about 20 hours. Overnight, any returning bees had passed through the residue and died. The stainless plugs had been seated for several hours, time enough for the wood fibers to swell around the corrugated edges, locking them in. The wood filler had skinned over, ready for sanding. The Suspend Polyzone was drying in the warm spring air. Everything was in place, but nothing was proven. The real test would come the following morning, because if a single female had escaped the foam, if she was still alive inside a plugged tunnel, we'd find fresh sawdust below the hole, a small pile of pale shavings, curled like pencil shavings, the sign that a bee had chewed a desperate escape route. If she'd done that, the protocol had failed, and if she'd done that, she'd lay her eggs somewhere else, and the whole cycle would start again. I'd know in 12 hours. How I spent those 12 hours is not interesting. A restless night, a cup of coffee, a headlamp. I walked out to the barn just after sunrise, and the very first thing I saw stopped me in my tracks. No sawdust, not a single curl of fresh wood below a single hole, not on the vertical posts, not under the rafters, not along the fascia, where the old damage had been worst. The sun was still low, the light pale and flat, the kind of light that catches texture. I could see the grain of the wood clearly, the tracks of the putty knife, the faint, domed shadows of the stainless plugs beneath the filler. Everything was intact. I walked the perimeter of the barn twice. I checked the holes from the day before, the ones Mackenzie had treated with foam, the ones she'd plugged herself with the BB Pro 30 inserts. They were sealed, silent. I hadn't realized until that moment how much noise carpenter bees make inside a structure. The constant low buzzing, the scrape of mandible against cellulose. It had been so constant for so long that I'd stopped hearing it. Now, it was gone. The barn felt empty, in a way I hadn't experienced since we bought the property. Mackenzie came out barefoot, still in pajamas, a granola bar in one hand. She looked at the beam we'd been fighting the longest. She pointed at the plugged holes, counted 12 of them, and then looked up where the morning sun was hitting the roofline. No hoverers. That's what she called the male bees, the territorial ones that patrol in front of the nest. They were always there, 5 or 6 of them every morning, swooping at anything that passed. They were gone too, not killed, because we never targeted them. They'd simply moved on when the nesting sites vanished. A male carpenter bee's whole purpose is to guard a tunnel. His mate is inside. Remove the mate, remove the tunnel, and he has no mission. He leaves. That's the behavior most traps exploit. And it's also why those traps never end in infestation. You catch the guards, not the queen builder. Our approach targeted the builder, and when she was gone, the guards dissolved into the landscape. We stood there for maybe 2 minutes, not speaking. Then she finished her granola bar, brushed the crumbs off her shirt, and said, "Does this mean we don't have to do it again next year?" I looked at the beam. The Suspend Polyzone barrier was rated for 90 days. I'd applied it in early April. By the calendar, it would degrade by July, long after the nesting season ended. The plugs were stainless steel. They wouldn't degrade at all. The filler could be repainted. The wood was now a fortress. "No," I said. "This is a one-time job. Maybe a touch-up spray in 2 springs if we see any scouting. But this is done. And that's the part of the protocol that never makes it into the how-to videos. The before and after is instantaneous, but the long tail of the fix is invisible. You don't see the holes that never got drilled. You don't see the female that landed, touched the polymer, and fell dead before breaking the surface. You don't see the damage that didn't happen. And because you don't see it, it's easy to forget that the treatment worked at all. You notice the problem only when it returns. So here is the surprising detail that the pest control industry rarely states plainly. Carpenter bees have a site fidelity rate of over 90%. A female born in your fascia will return to your fascia to lay her eggs. Her daughters will do the same. And if you break the cycle with one complete treatment, you may never have another infestation in that structure again. Not for a year, not for a decade. The wood becomes invisible to them. I confirmed this with a follow-up check in August, long after the barrier should have worn off. Still no activity. Then again the following March, before the new season. I found one bee cautiously hovering near the barn's eave, then veering away. She'd sensed something she didn't like. Or perhaps she didn't find the opening she was looking for. The plugs were still there. The wood was whole. I never sprayed again that year. And if you walk up to the barn today, 3 years later, you'll see the faint dimples of the filled holes, and not a single new one beside them. That's the proof. Now, if you've got wooden structures on your property and you are staring at a round hole right now, the next step is not a sticky trap. The next step is the 4-stage protocol I just showed you, and I've put the exact products and the step-by-step guide in the description. But before you go, there's one more thing I need to tell you. This protocol doesn't just save your barn. It changes how you think about every pest problem on your property. Most solutions ask you to choose between killing a beneficial insect and watching your structure get hollowed out. That's a false choice. You can protect your wood and keep the pollinators working your garden if you target your approach. What we did here works for fences, decks, eaves, any untreated softwood that catches spring sunlight. And if you have a wooden structure on your property right now, you already have everything you need to stop the damage before it gets expensive. Hit subscribe if that kind of practical thinking makes sense to you. And if this content really clicked, there's a special offer waiting for you through the link in the first pinned comment below. I've put together a resource that makes this whole protocol even easier to follow, and it's only available there. Thanks for watching. Now, go seal those holes.